everybody. Welcome back to IBP Immigration Law's YouTube channel. My name is Ingrid Perez. I am an immigration attorney based in Orlando, Florida. And this video today I think is going to be really wonderful for our viewers. We're going to be talking about best practices for letters of recommendation for EB-1A petitions and EB-2 NIW petitions. I compiled a list of some 5 or 6 questions that I get asked quite a bit, and I figured I would address all of these questions head on. But before we start, I want to just explain a little bit about what an EB-2 NIW or an EB-1A is. These are actually 2 distinct types of self-petitions. These petitions allow foreign nationals who are eligible to petition for their own green cards without a labor certification, without a job offer. You don't have to wait on an employer to do it. Each petition type has different requirements. For EB-1A, for example, you have to be an individual of extraordinary ability. For EB-2 national interest waiver, you have to have a minimum of an advanced degree and be working in an area and have an endeavor that is in a national interest. And if you want to learn more about what it takes to get those petitions approved, please watch other videos of mine where I go into deep dives. But here we're focusing exclusively on the letters. So let's get right to it. The first question that I get quite a bit for people who are just beginning their EB-2 or EB-1A process, the question that I get all the time is, what role do letters of recommendation play in the overall application? Why are they so critical? So I want to start off by saying that don't think of letters of recommendation as letters of recommendation. I like to think of them as testimonials. They should be objective, expert testimonials of your work, your impact, your quantifiable data, your results, etc. So they are very critical because they add context into your work, your achievements, your accomplishments, your endeavor. They help tell the story of your case to the immigration officer. So they are very critical in that sense. Another reason why they are also so important is because depending on who is writing this testimony or this letter recommendation for you, it can have a lot of weight, right? So for example, if these letters are coming from a quasi or government agency discussing the importance of your work, that is very powerful and holds a lot of weight. If these letters are coming from other industry professionals or maybe academics who can talk about your work, that is also very good and very impactful. But you have to be very strategic as to how you use these letters, and I'm going to get into that a little bit more. So, next question. What key elements should every strong letter of recommendation include to effectively support an EB-1A or an EB-2 NIW petition? I think this is a really great question because thinking about these letters again as expert testimonials, we want to establish each letter writer or each person that is writing a support letter in your case as an expert. And in order for us to do that, we have to qualify them as such. So I like to always start my letters with an introduction of who is the person. We need to qualify this person to provide an expert opinion. So a brief summary of their professional background, how they know you, how they know your work, how they have used your work, how they have seen your work be applied in the field, things like that helps set the stage for what they are going to say. The following paragraphs should really be about the individual projects or individual, results you've achieved, the problems that you've been able to solve. I like to take on a show, don't tell approach to these letters. I think it is really important to be descriptive, to use active language, to not use hyperbole or compliments, none of that type of language, because I feel like that just goes right over the immigration officer's head. You want to be very descriptive and paint a picture of exactly what you did and the quantifiable impact of your work, of your solution, of your research, of your project, or whatever it is that the person is writing about. Finally, I think a really strong closing is very important. But again, thinking about the purpose of that letter. Is that person going to be talking about the national interest of your endeavor, the national importance of your work? Or is that person going to be talking about how you are well positioned to advance your endeavor? And these are two things, for example, in the context of an EB-2 national interest waiver petition. Now, in the context of an EB-1A petition for a person of extraordinary ability, think about the reason why that person is writing that letter. I like to use letters, expert testimonial letters in EB-1A petitions in the context of an original contribution or a leading or critical role. So if you're talking about an original contribution, you want to close with a really strong, powerful conclusion paragraph that summarizes, what has been said. If you're writing in the context of a critical or leading role, you want to talk about how your role in the organization has, been very important, and how the organization depends on you or depended on you for, whatever it is that you were doing, helping the organization move forward. So I think those are the crucial elements for a letter. All right. So the third question is, from your experience, what are some common mistakes or weaknesses you see in recommendation letters that can undermine an otherwise strong case? I think this is such a great question because now that everybody is using artificial intelligence, AI to write, I see a lot of garbage, to be quite honest. I see a lot of terrible letters because AI doesn't give you that show, don't tell, descriptive writing that I think only a very skilled writer can do. AI gives a lot of fluff, a lot of compliments, a lot of just words that sometimes don't mean anything. So I think that if you're going to use AI, use it very carefully, use it very strategically. Maybe you want to use it to just change the tense of a sentence, maybe from a passive to active tense, or maybe you want to use it to sort of summarize a key point. But I would just use it very discriminately and very carefully because you don't want your letters to be written with AI. They all look alike and they all start looking generic and they all just become a bunch of letters of compliments as opposed to testimonials, which I think is really important. Another weakness is not providing that detailed description, that quantifiable information that the immigration officer really needs to understand the rest of your evidence in context. So you don't want generic, vague assumptions or assertions. You want quantifiable data in these letters and make them really concrete, succinct, to the point. And like I always say, paint a picture, make the officer see your work, your impact through these letters. I think that's very important. All right. So now, question number 4. For EB-1A and EB-2 national interest waiver, how important is it to have recommenders who are independent, meaning they haven't worked directly with the applicant versus those who have collaborated closely? I think that this kind of goes back to something that I said earlier in the video. It sort of depends the why of the letter, right? So if it is a person that is discussing your abilities, that is discussing what they have personally seen and witnessed you do, it is very important that this person is able to say that they have personal knowledge of what you have done, personal knowledge of your accomplishments. So it should be somebody that knows you, right? So, it just depends on who's available, obviously, a lot of times, and who's able to write this letter. But I think it's really important to understand the why the person is writing the letter, which helps you decide who is going to be writing the letter. Now, independent letters, right, from independent experts that maybe don't know you personally, have not worked with you, can be great in the context, for example, of an EB-1A petition when we are describing an original contribution of major significance. So if you have a professor who's an academic who can review your work, who can review your patents, who can review your invention and write an independent letter as an expert, that can also hold a lot of weight. But you have to be careful, I think, as to the reason why. And you have to be careful, I think, also with, independent letters that you pay for, because these people Not that they're not academics, not that they are not necessarily, well-versed and able to provide a very strong expert testimonial, but they may lack some context, right? That a person that you may actually be able to have a conversation with and, build some rapport with may write on your behalf. So I think it just sort of depends. I do think that these letters should be chosen carefully. Who's going to write these letters? Who's going to sign these? Again, always thinking about the why the person is writing. All right, the next question. Do you recommend applicants draft their own letters for review by the recommender, or should they leave the writing entirely to the recommender? I think this is a personal choice. It really depends on maybe the lawyer you're working with. I know that in my office, I like to draft the letters, and of course, always give the letter signer the final say. I know that these people are busy. I know that they are working really hard. They're not really thinking about, this. So I like to do the work for them up front. I work with clients to get the information that we need to provide in the letters. So it's often a very collaborative type of environment where we're, creating many drafts together before I feel it is final, so that the letter writer can go on, do the final review, add whatever final touches he or she may feel is needed, and sign. So that is how I do these letters. I have had letter writers who want to write their own letters. So in that situation, I give them a guide of what I'm looking for. I give them some sample letters. I give them specific questions that I want them to address. So if you want the letter writer to write the letter, or if they are insisting on writing the letter, just make sure that you give them some guidance, some guidelines, and answer specific questions and address specific points that you want to in the letter. All right, and finally, if you could give just one piece of advice to someone preparing their recommendation letter package right now, what would it be? So I would say that don't be surprised if it's going to take many tries to get the letter just right. I know that in my law firm, we go through many revisions. I mean, I really want to be able to tell a story, paint that picture. For me, it's really important to really understand what the client does, what the client is offering. And I need to translate that to the immigration officer. So a lot of times, for example, when I'm writing with clients who are software engineers or people who work in tech and their work is very technical, it's a different language altogether. So we go through many different revisions, and I always tell the clients, dumb it down. I need it to be simple. I need it to be easy. I need it to, be very easy to understand. So that is the approach. So don't be surprised if it takes many drafts. It's okay. Get it right. Put yourself in the shoes of the immigration officer who reads hundreds of these all the time, and you want your letter to stand out. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to talk to me about your EB-1A or your EB-2 NIW, please visit my website. It's ibplaw.com. There is a link there where you can fill out an intake and complete a free evaluation. I will review your case. If I think that you have a good case based on what you submit, I would definitely invite you for a full conversation.